Hi everyone, it's Brittany. I don't know why I haven't made this video before. Young adult books have been such a central part of reading for me that it baffles me that I haven't made this before. For me, growing up, reading was one of the main hobbies that I had. It became a little bit harder in middle school just because that's when you start getting forced to read books and things change. But I definitely found like my niche in books at that time, which has sort of stuck and like evolved into more an adult version of that. But I read a lot of books that were geared towards young adults but had some sort of general theme of like trauma. So I read a lot of books about like teen pregnancy, self-harm, sexual assault, different forms of sexuality. It felt like at the time like that was really the content that I want to read about. I don't know if you've noticed, but nothing's changed. I feel like there's just been so much more growth for me that's happened in reading YA that I will forever, ever read YA because it's my roots, it's where I came from, and it always, whenever I feel myself getting into a reading slump, going back to YA always brings me back out of it. So forever a lover of YA, so sorry if that's not your thing. But that's why I'm here. If it's not your thing, if you feel like an adult and you don't like YA, I'm gonna bring you some books that you may love, even if you're an adult. Full disclaimer, I've already said that I love YA, so the bias is insurmountable at this point. But this is also not an exhaustive list of YA that I like or that I think adults would like. It's really just the ones that came to mind when I was like, why haven't I thought of this before? So if you don't like YA, I recommend giving these 10 books a chance and maybe letting it change your mind. The first book I want to talk about is actually like the one that is like right on the edge. It may be more on like the, oh, this is really YA side. And I don't care, I'm gonna take that risk because this was definitely a big game changer for me. When I read this book, I was also like really trying to find what I wanted to do in the future. And it was feeling like working for mental health in a hospital setting was really what I was looking for. And this book just really helped like bring that full circle for me. And that book is It's Kind of a Funny Story. What a throwback. I feel like I need to see this book on BookTube more, or Bookstagram, or anywhere. One, because its cover is stunning and is like a really central part to the book, but I feel like there's just so much that we have to learn from this book. I feel like it really talks about teen mental health and that experience in a really straightforward way, which at the time, nobody was talking about this at that time, from my experience as a teen at that time. I felt very much like this was the first time I had seen anything like that represented. It does have trigger warnings for suicidality, and really the bulk of the book takes place on an inpatient unit in a mental health hospital. Really interesting. There is a lot of like floaty teen romance stuff in it, but the central part of like wanting to feel that acceptance from your family, dealing with your identity, and then feeling the depths of really challenging depression. What a great way to enter that sphere of reading. Highly recommend this one. Forever will be one of my faves. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. This was introduced to me on BookTube actually and was like a game changer for me when I read it. I thought it was so good. But it's The Inexplicable Logic of My Life. I also want to put in a little plug for Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I listened to that on audio and I like loved it. But that's not on this list, so just I still have 8 others. This was like one of the most multi-dimensional YA books that I had read in a while. I feel like it addressed the topic of grief and loss and familial relationships in a way that I hadn't seen, specifically that father-son relationship and mother-son relationship. I feel like it also delves into different realms of sexuality and things like that, which it was just stunning. It was a stunning read, and if you haven't read this, this might be the book that I recommend you start with for YA. It's like right on the edge, I think, of like literary fiction and YA. The only reason I think it is more YA is just the writing is a little bit more geared to a younger audience, but you don't lose anything from the story in that. So highly recommend this. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Oh, I love this book too, and it was such a disappointing movie, and I talked about it in a video last year, so I'm sorry if this is a repeat for you. But The Miseducation of Cameron Post. This book, I feel like I would have loved to have had this book in high school. I want to make sure that like the youth of today have access and know about this book, just because I felt like it did a really great job talking about the conflicting sides of sexuality and trying to build your identity in that way. This does detail a female-female romance, and there are female-male romances in this book as well, so if you're looking for purely female-female, it's not this book. However, I do think it paints the picture of that conflict really well. It talks about a younger girl who's discovering that she has an attraction to girls. The complicated piece is that there's a lot of loss and grief that happens within this book. Not just like actual loss and grief, but loss and grief in that sense of self, because Cameron is sent to a conversion camp. It's like so many stories within this story. It's like broken up in parts, except it's not actually broken up in parts. It's just in my mind, there's like when she's younger, when she's like a teen, and then when she's a teen and has this next phase of her life of the conversion camp. And I feel like what a whirlwind. It was super emotional for me, and I think is really important for youth to read to really weigh some of those important issues. So such a good one. Don't watch the movie first. You don't even have to watch the movie at all if you don't want to. Though I do love the actors and actresses in it, but not enough for me. This is such a given, and if you haven't read it yet, I'm kind of mad at you. Even if you don't love YA, like, what is wrong with you? This is the book you need to be reading. I changed my mind. I love The Inexplicable Logic of my life, but if you haven't read this, then we're in a fight right now, is how I feel. The book is obviously The Hate U Give. This is a game changer. This was like the first book in a while that I like, what's beyond crying? Sobbing? That I was just sobbing reading. But not in a way that's like, oh, don't read this, it's so sad. In a way that's like, this is so important and so raw and so real. What are we doing? This should be required. It does cover topics within the Black Lives Matter movement, and I don't know what's too spoilery to say about this book because I want you to just experience it. But there is somebody in this book that is shot, and a lot of aftermath that comes from that, and it's very real and very much exactly like what we experience today, unfortunately. Not only do I think adults need to be reading this just out of like how great and wonderfully done this book is, but I think it's really important to be able to communicate to youth about this movement and about this book as a whole and that experience and what we're teaching youth. So, did you buy it yet? Are you sold? You need to read it. Next book, I will admit, is a little bit more YA, so just bear with me. I still think it's important. But the book is Ramona Blue. I feel like I've recommended my face off on Bookstagram of this book just because, one, this cover is beautiful. Get out of here. But again, I feel really strongly about developing your sense of identity and being yourself and feeling good about being yourself. And I feel like this book does such a great job exploring identity in the realms of sexuality, in the realms of race and class. I just think that there's so many different complex issues in this book that so many people face, youth and adults alike, that there's something for everyone in this book, and I need you to read it. The one that I think is just a little bit more fun and like on point with not just youth but adults too is the book Sadie. This was kindly sent to me by Wednesday Books for review last year, And so it's out now. It was out in September. Sadie is missing, and we have a little bit of a clue as to what's going on with her. This podcast is trying to bring attention to try to find her or solve really what's going on. I feel like it really draws in a lot of what's popular with podcasts now, but also, again, addresses a lot of things that Sadie goes through that leads her to this point that I think is really important for youth and adults to be reading. So this is a good one. They're all good ones. I wouldn't be recommending them if they weren't. Oh, I love this book. I feel like I bought this around my birthday last year and no regrets. The book I'm talking about is Darius the Great is Not Okay. This was such an interesting read for me because I feel really frustrated that I just haven't read many books that accurately depict Persian culture. This book I think does a good job of like an introduction to that. So I loved that, thought that was fantastic. And it also talks about different experiences of sexuality. But most importantly, I think it touches on the different intergenerational and cultural experiences within his family and the disconnect that can happen between family members because of different reasons or different interpretations of the culture. I think that this is really great for adults and youth to be reading to really continue that conversation and address some of those concerns as they come up for youth. And just like so many lovable and relatable characters in this book. It's a gem. Next we have I'm Not Missing. This was kindly sent to me by Flatiron Books for review last year, and I loved it. I think that there's aspects of this book that adults would find to be like really YA, mostly like the relationship aspects of it. However, I do think that it's a more accurate and healthy way of discussing a teen relationship. So if you're an adult that has a teen, this would be a good book to read to just stay informed and to help model like appropriate adult intervention in teen relationships. There is a father-daughter relationship in this book that I found to be one of the greatest representations of that I've read in any book, YA or whatever, forever. And to me, that's like the real takeaway of this book. The father in this book is the MVP, and love that so much. Oh man, this one got me. And I'm talking about If You Come Softly. Wow, this one really snuck up on me. And again, this is kind of similar to what I've been saying throughout this whole video, but if you're a parent of a teen, this book, I think, accurately depicts how teens can feel when in conflict with their parents. I think that there's a lot of different familial experiences depicted in this book, both in terms of race, religion, class, all of the things. And I think a big part of coping with that is finding yourself and connecting in a relationship with others. It is a heartbreaking book, and I can't tell you why. So know that going in and read it because it's important. It's written beautifully, and again, one that I think all ages can really take away something from. And last but not least, this is probably the most like curveball of them all because there's such a clear-cut theme within the other books I recommended. But this one is I'm Still Alive. And this was complicated because it's the most oddball of them all. I don't think that necessarily everyone will have the same experience I did in reading this book. However, we love a complex family dynamic, and this book definitely delivers that. This book is set in Alaska, and there's just so much difference with that. There's so much self-exploration, so much that you have to face that you wouldn't necessarily face somewhere else. I was in the most ultimate tears by the end. It's a really heartbreaking, but also like really like hopeful and striving kind of book. Another one with a complex father-daughter relationship. However, this one doesn't necessarily leave me feeling the most like warm and fuzzy like the other book had. Highly recommend this one. A really great reading experience, I think. All right. Those are the 10 YA books that I would recommend if you are an adult that is unsure if you like YA. And I think it's really important to remember, especially if you are a parent of a youth, that these are the books youth are reading. So even if it feels like I'm not getting the same kind of thing out of this book, reading it from that perspective can be really helpful for them too. So just a good reminder, something to keep in mind. I hope this was helpful to you. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.